Hey everybody, it's Romania Black. We are on episode 4 of season 3 of Bungo Stray Dogs. My ill deeds are the work of God. I love the titles of some of these episodes. So I recently finished reading the novel 15, the light novel that the first 3 episodes are based off of. And it was really neat. I really enjoyed it. I actually have some images that I want to show you all. I don't ever really do this for Bungo Stray Dogs, but I'm like, I feel the need to show them. Because they're just really, really good. So I had some images. Obviously, the cover art I really liked for 15, showing Rando with Chuya and Dazai, and then him like in his cast, and him with his feet. It's really dynamic. I love the mangaka, how they draw all these characters. It's so cute. I actually love it. But there's a couple panels that I want to show you all from the light novels have illustrations with them. And then they have like usually some extra pages. And this light novel had more than Dark Age did. I found this novel curious because, yeah, the Dark Age adaptation was really faithful to the light novel. The anime was really faithful to the light novel of the Dark Age. There was really only like one thing that was different. Everything else was like beat for beat. But I appreciated in this novel the fact that it was a little different, that you did get to go a little bit more into the characters. Definitely getting into Mori's point of view is really cool. If you go on my Twitter page, I've been following along and making notes about as I read the chapters and what I've noticed about it. But getting more into Mori's character, the idea of the rules that Mori has, like when Dazai and Chuya go to the arcade, it's because Mori's like, I have a rule against violence within Port Mafia members, and so Dazai's like, well, I can't hurt Chuya. And so they have this video game thing. There's a moment early on, and it's kind of juxtaposed at the beginning and ending of the book. Early on, when Dazai first is sent to go find Rando with Chuya, they're teasing each other, and Dazai's like, oh, Chuya, you love me, don't you? And Chuya's like, nah. And then at the very end, it's reversed, where Chuya's like, oh, are you helping me to save me? And Dazai's like, help you? No, I hate you. And it's like, I don't believe it, but it's like that parallel, the contrast from start to finish of the novel. But there's also some things that were left out that I thought were really interesting that were being said. One is that we got the name of Rando's partner, and their name is Paul in the light novel. And I'm going to bring Paul's name up again here in a minute when we talk about old Rando, his actual name and his ability. Thank you for telling me that information. I was about to watch this episode, and I went on Patreon, and this wonderful patron was like, oh, hey, here's Rando, what author he's based off of, and here's what his ability's called. And I'm like, yes, awesome, cool. I can research it before the episode. So thank you for that. But we get to know some facts that are kind of hinted at in the anime adaptation, but not fully said. Like in the graveyard, I was wondering last episode whose grave it was that Chuya was talking to, and it's Rando's. We get confirmation of that. Also, Rando's death is different in the novel than in the anime. So spoilers, skip ahead a little bit if you don't want spoilers to the light novel. I guess it doesn't matter at this point because it's canon either way. But in the light novel, it's a little less... I get production-wise why the anime changed it, because in the anime, it's like Rando's using his powers, and it's all flashy and cool and everything. And in the light novel, it's a bit more down-to-earth, bare bones. So Chuya gets the scythe from the previous boss, and he manages to break through Rando's ability, and actually Chuya stabs him with the scythe. And Rando's like, how'd you stab me with the scythe? And then you find out that Chuya's also touching him with this cloth wrapped around him, and the cloth extends back, and Dazai's holding the cloth. So it's like a little, like an extension of that transmission. So I want to show you all the picture from the light novel of him stabbing Rando in the chest with the scythe. And they're all like bloody and beat up. And it kind of makes more sense because in the anime, Chuya just slams him down with gravity, and I was like, oh, that just killed him? But it makes more sense because in the light novel, he stabs him with the scythe and it punctures his lung, and because he's human, he dies, right? There are also some panels. There was the panel of Chuya and Dazai first meeting. It's very cute. I like the way that the mangaka draws Chuya when he's young. He has like the little short bob haircut. It's really cute. And then I really like, from episode 2, the panel of Rando standing above Chuya. I thought that was really well adapted into the anime in episode 2. And I like Dazai's surprise in this panel of hearing that Chuya is Arabaki, the vessel form. I like that. It's like one of the few times we see Dazai genuinely surprised, and it's in that moment. So I really, really like that. But yeah, so we get a different death. We get more into Mori's backstory. We also find out about Q. In the novel, Mori, we find out that Q was 5 or 6 when he was taken in. And so that would put him at like 14 or 15 now. Q being like a teenage kid, kind of like Atsushi. He's just smaller. But Mori establishes that at the time, Mori doesn't know what Q's ability is. Mori just knows that they found Q at a hospital. Q was alone with another kid. The other kid hurt themselves. And Q's somehow to blame. But Mori notes that Q can't activate their own ability. It has to be activated through an outside source. And so he's going to put Dazai in charge of Q to figure out what it is and how his ability works. And so I'm like, that's cool foreshadowing of Dazai and Q's relationship. Because in the scene, Q's like, I want to play with you. And Dazai in the novel is like, sure, maybe later when you're older. And it's like, And then we go back to season 2 and Q's like, let's play Dazai. And Dazai's like, I'll kill you. It's a nice little callback to that idea. Q being like, I'm older, let's play. It's really cool in the novel. So I recommend 15, the light novel. It helped explain a lot of things, and it made the Arahabaki thing make a lot more sense. There's even a chapter that's from Arahabaki's point of view. It reminded me a lot of the Man in the Flask, the entity in the flask from Full Metal Alchemist. Like I said in the reaction, it reminded me a lot of it because it's from Arahabaki's point of view when they were broken out of the facility by Rando. And so it's a really cool to see from that entity's perspective before it inhabits Chuya. So it's pretty cool. But I want to show you all the pages too of their character designs. I like Dazai in the little suit, and he has Mori's black coat, and it's too big for him. I like Dazai with his little hand on his hip, looking all punky. Speaking of punks, you got Chuya with his ram belt buckle. I love it because it goes back to the sheep. I like it. And then I like that his sleeves and stuff zip up, and he has the hoodie underneath. The cropped hoodie. It's really cool. I love Rando's design. We don't get to see it in the anime, but he has the coat and everything. And then look, he has like the little corset pants, the pants that tie up, and the button-up shirt with the little tiny tie and his boots. I'm like, Rando, what a gentleman. What an absolute gentleman, which we know his name is Arthur now. We'll talk about that in a second. And then, oh my God, Q, little baby Q with the slippers and the doll. But I love the little detail that the mangaka does, that Q's shirt is like a straight jacket, and then when he pulls the collar up, it makes like a straight jacket over his face. That's so weird, but it's kind of adorable. I'm like, oh my God. The character designs are wonderful. I really, really like them in this. I love how they drew baby Q. Very, very cool. So yeah, speaking of which, and I know this is a long intro, but I have lots of stuff to talk about going into episode 4. But speaking of which, so I was told by the fellow patron that Rando's actual name is Arthur Rimbaud. And it's funny because they established that Arthur Rimbaud was someone that Chuya in real life translated actual poetry and works from. So I'm like, oh, that's a nice tie-in and connection to those two authors, that in real life, Chuya was transcribing Rimbaud's work into Japanese. And in the show, Rimbaud gives Chuya the hat. The hat's passed down. It's really cool. I like that a lot. It's a nice, subtle little discussion there. But also, we have his ability. And I was wondering what Arthur or Rando's ability was, and it's called Illuminations. And so I looked up what Illuminations is derived from, and it says the ability is a reference to an incomplete collection of prose poems called Illuminations, written by Arthur Rimbaud between 1873 to 1875. And so it makes sense that it's incomplete because throughout the entire episodes where we see Rando, he's always talking about things aren't finished and he needs closure for something. He's always cold because things haven't worked out and he doesn't have closure with it. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's a nice tie back to that. But it says the title of the collection was proposed by Paul Verlaine. And in the light novel, Rando says his partner's name was Paul. So that's interesting. The collection consists of 42 poems, with 40 of them being prose poems and the other 2 being vers libre. Verlaine explained that the title was based on the English word illuminations in the sense of colored plates, and a subtitle that Rimbaud had already given the work. So the colored plates kind of ties to Rimbaud's ability to have the geometric shapes and plate figures. It's very cool. But yeah, so Paul's established as his partner. And I know now that there is a sequel novel to 15 called Stormbringer, and some of you have commented that Stormbringer has not been adapted yet in the anime, which is sad because there's like a little preview of it at the end of the light novel, and Paul establishes, we get a little preview of the character Paul, the partner of Rando that he said he killed but didn't. and he establishes himself in the light novel as Chuya's younger brother or older brother. I don't think that's in a literal sense of the word, but I'm wondering, I'm like, is Paul a vessel for an entity kind of like Arhabaki? I don't know. I haven't read Stormbringer, and I probably will go back to the manga for a little while before I read any more light novels. So I'll be interested when I get to Stormbringer eventually if what all that entails. But since it's not been done in the anime yet, I'm going to hold off and not read Stormbringer yet because I don't want to get into any plot points that season 3 talks about. So I'm going to hold off on that one and maybe go back to reading the manga and catching up with it. So, but yeah, I wanted to bring all that up. I know I've wasted 10 minutes, but there's so much to talk about in between. I took a literal week and a half between episodes 3 and 4. I'd watched episode 3 ahead of time, and I was like, oh, I've got plenty of time to read the light novel. And then I got busy, and I was like, I need to read the light novel. And so I'm just now getting around to getting it done and watching episode 4. So it's been a little while since I've watched Bungo Stray Dogs, which is exciting because I'm ready to get back into it. But yeah, that's all the preamble for this. So thanks for bearing with me in my ramblings before we start this. But let's do this. Let's get back into Bungo Stray Dogs. I'm assuming that we're done with the flashback, but I'm not entirely sure. We'll see. But in any case, we're going to start episode 4 here in 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Oh, buddy. Oh my gosh, Fyodor! Wow, what an episode to set him up as being so devious. But here's the thing. It's like he's on par with Dazai and Mori for just being here's the crazy thing. Like, he's more like Mori in a sense of being calm and collected. Like Dazai has these wild feral moments where he's really dark and his like inner demons kind of show on Dazai. And Dazai kind of runs like the emotional range of being like super trolly and super animated and super like teasing and kind of wild and chaotic. But then there's moments where Dazai is quiet and feral and dark and sinister. Fyodor doesn't ever act sinister throughout this entire episode. Mori even has little flashes though. Mori's kind of like Dazai where he has flashes of like his eyes get crazy and stuff. Fyodor never acts like that. I feel like I'm going to be terrified when Fyodor gets to that point because I think it's there. I think that rage and anger and craziness is there, but he hides it so well. But, oh my God. What a way to ramp up your season villain. If you're like, here's our antagonist. Here he is. Have fun with this. Go. This whole episode was just to establish how much of a threat he is. That's terrifying. That really is terrifying. Because like the guild was a problem and the guild was scary, but there was still I don't know, there was kind of like it wasn't like on Dazai's level of the cat and mouse game of, and I say cat and mouse, and we got Natsumi shown with that stupid calico colored cat and the president and them in this. I'm like, is there a connection between Natsumi and that cat? Is there a connection? I feel like there's a connection because it showed Mori, the president, that calico cat, and then it showed Natsumi popping up. So I'm like, is the cat Natsumi's pet? And he like has him go out and survey things like for surveillance. Don't tell me, don't spoil me, but I find that there's a connection there. And the fact that Mori was saying like only a diamond can polish a diamond and said those were Natsumi's words to him and the president, like, there's a connection there. There's something there. I kind of want to look up the ace guy for the next episode. He's dead now, so, you know, we might as well learn his ability. But, so I like that the idea of playing poker and stuff is established through there. The kid as the narrator saying, it's not as though I'm unaware. I have terrible luck. What an awful life. And that's so cool when they did the thing of showing him as an adult, like how he perceives himself as an adult with like the 5 o'clock shadow and the scar and looking all buff, being like he'd be the leader of the Port Mafia. Like that was really, really cool. But damn. And here's the sad part about it all is when they bring the kid to Fyodor at first, the kid pays the guy off with the gems. And we now learn that the gems are people's lives. Like he just paid him off with someone else's life. That's really kind of disturbing. Kind of disturbing. And he's like, well, this isn't even enough to cover what it took to get him, but have fun. Speak to him and he'll suck out your soul. And at first I was like, is that really his ability? But no, his ability is basically just killing people automatically. It's like, awesome. Sounds like a fun time. But the idea also being that by sucking out your soul, he just drains you of all your goodwill and will to live, because he's like basically saying like how tactical he is, because he drove Ace to kill himself. As soon as Ace started like trying to figure out what was going on, I was like, no, that's not what's happening. You're assuming a lot, you know. And then yeah, I like the animation of the kid going, like thinking it's gonna be a monster. I'm like, why would you take his head right off to begin with? I guess to see who it was. Fyodor is a very attractive character in a weird way. He's very attractive in a weird way. He reminds me a lot of Mori. It just seems like it's no coincidence that his character design looks a lot like Mori and Dazai's. So, but I love the idea. I'm a big fan of Sherlock, so I like the idea of having like a Sherlock and Moriarty cat and mouse. You know, you have Rampo and Poe, which is more like Rampo and Poe is played up for laughs, and it's comedic because there's nothing really serious about their rivalry. But I can totally see where Dazai and Fyodor would have a rivalry, because Dazai has prided himself the last 2 seasons on being ahead of the game. Dazai's been like, I'm always 2 steps ahead of everybody. And Mori's like, I'm always 2 steps ahead of everybody. Fyodor seems like he's a block ahead of everybody. And that's a problem. A bit of a problem. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we see I'm rewatching the episode. We see the calico cat jumping into the moonlight. And then we see the guy that I'm assuming is Natsumi, because he has the bowler hat and everything, pop up right behind him. I want to know Ango using his ability. I've wanted to see Ango use his ability this whole time. And the fact that we get him in these like traditional robes using it, I'm so intrigued. I'm so excited. I can't tell you how excited I am. And then yeah, Fyodor, the House of the Dead Rats. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it so much. I can't wait to get into this season. I did like the 15 flashback arc. I really did. But this is exciting. So we have the meeting between the executives. And there's the place for 5 executives. And Kyoka is the only one there. We know Chuya is one of them. So there's those 2. There's this Ace guy that just died. Dazai was an executive. No longer. So we don't know who replaced him. We don't know who the 5th one is. So yeah. So this Ace guy, what a sleaze. Like, I like his character because he's like the traditional sleazy villain, like the sleazy Port Mafia executive. And they're tying back to Dead Apple. I like it. They're tying back to the Tatsuhiko incident. And I thought the thing with the gems was cool, because that kind of ties back to Tatsuhiko in Dead Apple making people's abilities into the gems. That was kind of a cool callback to that. But yeah, Port Mafia Ace. Madness of the Jewel King. So I'm going to have to research him next episode, old Ace, and that ability, and see if it's a thing. It may be an anime only thing, but Madness of the Jewel King. I want to research that. I'm pretty curious. Kyoka and him were like getting back and forth on that, and her being like, well, and they like just dished it back and forth with each other, saying that Fyodor's more like a vampire, like sucking the soul out of you, sucking the life out of you, making you convinced that things are going your way, and they really are not. Yeah. And I like Kyoga's like, my organization, you're assuming a lot. It's almost like you want to become the boss or something. And Mori's like, I don't have time for this. He's like, I don't have time for this. Quit bantering. And Ace wants to take control of the moment and do the task and whatever, because he's trying to underhand Mori, and he's like, I'm going to hire, Fyodor out to help me take control of the Port Mafia. And I like that she's like, you were the first to flee for shelter, calling him out, being like, where were you during season 2? You were hiding away. And he's like, well, you were the first to be captured by the enemy. So I love it. I love the sassy banter back and forth. But here's the thing. Mori is smart. And Mori's like, sure, go for it. You're not going to get anything accomplished. It's fine. I'm sure you have a plan. Because when he says he has a plan, Maury just stares at him like, you capture this rat, you deal with it. But in the end, the funny thing is, because Kyoka's like, why would you trust him? He only paid to be here. He just forked up a bunch of money to the Port Mafia and is using us as glorified bodyguards. Why do you think he's going to be able to handle this? And to Maury's credit, he's like, yeah, this guy isn't loyal, but I also don't care what he does, because if he fails, then it's no skin off our back, because we're going to leave him to it. We have nothing to lose by losing him, because his power isn't even that crazy. But the problem with that is that I think they underestimated Fyodor as well. I think they underestimated Fyodor a lot, because Fyodor got out and he got the Book of Abilities. So he knows Maury's ability now too. Which we don't even know what Maury's ability is fully. So that's kind of crazy. But yeah, I don't know. And so your big mistake, Ace, was letting this guy into the secret room. Ugh. Letting him into the little vault on the ship. And basically, I don't know why any of these guys would work for him if they know that in an instant he could turn them into jewels. I don't know why they would do that. But I guess if they're in dire straits and they have no other options, working for this rich guy seems like it'd be a benefit. But when that kid was like, I was going to work my way up, I'm like, but you weren't ever going to get past Ace. So you kind of screwed up from the start, you know? So, and Ace severely underestimates Maury because he's like, oh, he's just a town doctor. He won't suspect anything. I'm like, hey, you clearly were hiding during season 2 and during Dead Apple, because Maury's extremely competent. I'm like, So yeah, but Fyodor being 2 steps ahead of everything, very Dazai-like, and having a rationale for why everything is working. Being like, no, I didn't even have to count the cards. I just looked at the scratches to know where. I'm like, what? Big brain. That's a galaxy brain. That's universe brain. That is Dazai level of planning, which makes me worried. And the problem is he can take a lot of hit. Like, he hits him fully on in the head with the wine bottle, and he earns the kid's trust to tell him. And here's the thing. He had the kid help him to get him cleaned up, and then he said what his ability was. And he said his ability was to control consciousness in space, to basically create, kind of like Rando, to create a separate dimension where it kind of reminded me of Rando and Lucy's abilities, because Lucy creates a pocket dimension that you're trapped in, and Rando creates like a subspace. So it's kind of like he was passing off his ability as something like that when it wasn't the case. I do love this line that Ace says to kind of establish what type of person he is. He's like, this is my gift. The ability to exchange my subordinates' remaining lifespan for gems of equal value. I can turn worthless lives into something valuable. That's such a line. That's such a disgustingly slimy line. And he calls it a merciful ability, but nah. It's really gross. And once it's put on, it can never be removed. It's a very specific ability too. But yeah, so yeah, Fyodor planned this whole thing. He figured out how the lock worked to the vault. He figured out where they were at. He had the communicator on there and the wine. And then he obviously, because the thing listening in wasn't a camera, it was just a monitor to listen to their conversation. So he couldn't see Fyodor stopping the clock or the communicator with the wine. Crazy. And and they got that boy to talk so he could say that about his ability. Like, the scary thing is Fyodor just looks so nonchalant and just like, I'm just here. I'm just bored. Like that's what he seems like. He's just bored solving this case. And it's almost like he's just doing this. And he tries to justify it, and then he's going to stop all the evil in the world. And by stopping all the evil, he's going to kill them all. And then just have the world the way he wants it. It's like, ugh. And that's terrifying. Like, people that, I talked about this at the end of season 3 and in Dead Apple, but characters that think that what they're doing is righteous and on the side of good when it's really not. Those characters are terrifying, because those characters, they don't believe they're doing anything wrong. They are totally in conviction of their powers and abilities and their morals. And so you're like, they have motivation and they think they're on the side of right. And that's pretty terrifying because then they feel justified. And talk no jutsu ain't gonna work on Fyodor. Friend Nakama no jutsu ain't gonna work either. It's like, I'm like, Chuya would probably be a great bet against Fyodor because Chuya with gravity manipulation would probably you'd be able to keep him away. And Dazai would be good against Fyodor, I'm assuming, because he could stop his power, but... So I'm curious when he says I cut my finger on a glass shard earlier. That was the one line in this episode that I was like, he seems focused. And that part kind of was curious to me. I was like, what? That part was a bit curious. And then I guess that was to get the kid to ask if he was scared or not. And then, of course, he's a rat. He's used to being in a dark cellar in a dark place like this. He's like, no, it's all good. And then him saying that, I love it. And I love when he confronts Ace again. He's like, you're not going to kill me right away because I have information you need. So you're going to try to get it out of me first. Like, let's be real. Let's be real of why I'm here and why you haven't killed me already. And Ace, realizes he's correct. And so the whole thing with the cards, that was like, that moment I was like, oh, it's about to go down. It is about to go down. I thought it was his ability that was I thought he was using his ability, because at the time I thought it was still controlling time and space, that he was using his ability to manipulate the cards and then manipulate the communicator, the clock, all of that. Because when Ace starts to think that they're in an alternate reality, I'm like, no, you're not in an alternate reality. He's just manipulating the reality, is what I thought. And so when he talks about killing, like at the further the conversation went, I was like, oh, you're going to try to kill yourself to get out of this reality and back into the real world. And you're just going to kill yourself. It's not going to do anything. And then that's exactly what happens. He killed himself thinking that it reminded me of, there's a moment in the Demon Slayer movie where something similar happens. And I don't want to spoil it if you've not seen the Demon Slayer movie, but it's a similar concept. And it's like, what if this is reality? And so, yeah, that point where he just got, because in theory, the card game makes a lot of sense. It's a cool concept. He's like, oh, at first the other party can win because they'll be able to start out on a good note. But then as the game goes on further, I'm going to have the advantage because if I can count cards, I know what you've picked, so I know what cards are left. So the moment you make a mistake, I can pick up and have a better odds and probability of getting the game right. But Fyodor was like a step ahead of the whole thing. Oh, that was so cool. That was so cool. And then, yeah, just further. And then he can't. And Fyodor just smiling the whole time, like watching this guy lose his mind and go mad. And that's what, like, sucking out his soul. That's the concept of the guy was just pushed to the brink. And the underground is for rats after all. Oh, I love that line. It's like, yes. And I love the idea. It's very, like, fitting that a gambler, he takes a gamble and thinks that it's, reality, and that this is the alternate reality, but you chose poorly. And I love when he calls him out, he's like, you're lying. And Fyodor's face is just like, no, I'm not. He's like, nice try. And then he reveals that they're on a ship and all that, and that the boss doesn't even know about this room. And he says that his ability is to trap your victim's mind inside their own head. And Fyodor's like, sure, you just keep thinking of how you figured it all out. Because this whole moment was very much like something you would see Rampo or Dazai do. They'd be like, oh yeah, we figured out how all this works. We figured you out. Like, it seems like something that if it had been on the other foot and the protagonists were saying it, it's like something you would expect out of an episode like this. But Fyodor's like, oh, you figured it out? Well, that's really good for you. Except, no, you've not figured it out at all. And then, yeah, he says he was born a king. And then we cut back to the kid. And then, yeah, and Fyodor's like, oh, is this the vault where he keeps all the gems and things? I don't care about the gems. I don't care about those pebbles. Like, I don't need the money. I need the information. Because like Ace says, he's like, the one who has the information is king. I love that line. And Fyodor's like, okay, yeah, sure. I'm going to go get the information now. Because that's what he wants. He wants to know about the abilities. I thought this kid looked like Chuya at first because of the hair for a split second, but with the scar and everything, I'm like, nah. But for a split second, I thought maybe it was like in between the last episode in the present time. And then, yeah, people are quick to believe they are thinking of their own will. Whether it's the surveillance or the clock, we believe that everything we discover is valuable. And yeah, some of the stuff he set up was just a non sequitur. It didn't matter. He just did it to throw him off. He's like, yeah, I just had the clock stop working to make it just seem more likely that we were in another space. I made the communicator stop working for whatever reason. I, played it all off like this just because, and you can take at value whatever you want. It's like, oh, we are loath to believe that our thoughts are being controlled. The method of escape he had heard from the kidnapper was one that erases a person's consciousness from an ability space, but I gave that information to the kidnapper deliberately. Yeah, I did it on purpose so that he would think that and think that he had knowledge I didn't have. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. And I'm surprised they actually showed us him hanging. Like, that was crazy. And stuffed bits of cork. Yeah, and I love the kid trembling, like he's just shaking because, yeah, he just destroyed him so easily. He killed the Port Mafia executive without anything. And I love that they're in the dark in this scene. And he's like, I enjoyed our card game, but he was mistaken. I didn't use my ability to win. I just memorized the cards. It's like crazy. Oh my gosh. Yeah, and he's like, he memorized all the scratches. And yeah, superhuman intelligence. Establishing Fyodor is just a league above everybody else. He thought it through himself and ended his own life. Crime is thought, and crime is respiration. And he was freed from all of it. Oh my God. Yeah, so crime and punishment is literally just killing people. It's literally just killing people. It goes back to Dazai telling Kunikita back in episodes 6 and 7 of season 1. He's like, justice is a weapon. It can't be used to save anybody, but it can be used to be the means to an ends. Oh, that's such a cool callback. I love it. And like, yeah, him killing somebody means nothing at all. He wanted the books with the abilities. And he tells the kid because he's like, as soon as he said that, he's like, oh, by the way, yeah, I'm going to bring the mercy of death upon the evil of this world, and I can't have anybody know about it. So don't worry. I'm just going to silence you, and it'll be fine. Like, he's just so calm about it. And that kid's like, shit. Yeah, we didn't stand a chance against this guy. And he's like, I can't let anybody know I've got this book because that's going to be bad. So I'm going to kill everybody, and then nobody's going to know. So he's just going to take this ship and go. So the question is, was the ship that he was he in a ship during the events of the last episodes of season 2? Was he in the ship monitoring everything? Or I guess he was somewhere else with Hawthorne. Yeah, he was somewhere else with Hawthorne, so never mind. The greatest silence. Yeah, and so the kid had said that he needed to be saved, and Fyodor's like, well, I'll save you, and by save you, I'm going to kill you. That's when I understood who can save evil. Yeah. And then putting the hand over his face and the light. This is my true ability. Yep, and he just, a thing darker, more hideous than evil. Yep, and he just basically just blew his brains out, basically, and did that with all the other members. So that's our villain. Oh my gosh, that's so crazy. May you be freed from the shackles of your crime and your soul salvaged. Yeah, like him just being a martyr and saying the Port Mafia and the ADA are next. No! So, cool. And then we cut to an AD with rainbows. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So Fyodor's terrifying. Good to establish our villain. Good to establish our villain. Spending a whole episode with him. And establishing how his ability works. Basically just to kill people. And his philosophy, and the fact that he is going to be a problem. And, I felt like even with the guild, the guild were kind of like, not goofy isn't the right word, but they were really comical and animated. And it kind of fit the tone of the series really well, because you had, like Q, even with Q's with the Port Mafia, but like the crazy ability of Q, but even Fitzgerald's ability is kind of hilarious with the money. It's like, oh, that's funny. And you have Steinbeck's ability, which is kind of creepy, but still interesting. And then everybody's abilities are all kind of fit their personality, but they're kind of like kooky and fun. Fyodor's just straight up killing people. That's not fun. It's a lot more serious. It's way more serious. So yeah, I'm a bit more worried because Fyodor just walks up and kills people with his hand. That's really freaky, and it's kind of a parallel to Dazai, because Dazai walks up and touches people and nullifies their abilities. Fyodor walks up, touches people, and nullifies their lives. So, fun times ahead. I'm really excited for the rest of this season. Again, just like in season 2, I wondered how we were going to transition from the flashback back to the present. And in season 2, we transitioned and brought some of the elements of the Dark Age arc into the current storyline, which was fun. In this, we just transition back to the darkness of our current antagonist, and then we're good to go. So I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. I'll probably research Ace for episode 5 and his ability. I'll research that, but I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. Thank you for listening to my ramblings. But this series, this was a really, really good episode. I liked this episode a lot. And so I'm excited to know where we're going to go to from here. So in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll be back soon with more Bungo Stray Dogs. Bye.